and I just bring it back. So you don't have to prepare. Some people, they're very anxious, and then they say, I want to know exactly all of the questions, but that's a very boring interview.
Mm-hmm.
You know all the questions. I mean, you should be able to learn with practicing your public speaking, and you go to many podcasts. You start with you don't have to be average. I mean, on average podcasts, but go on podcasts where the host is good.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Josef Schinwald is the CEO of Guest Experts on Air, a renowned visibility strategist with a deep understanding of the media landscape. With experience as an associate publisher and vice president of a multinational newspaper in Latin America, Josef is also a professor at 3 prestigious universities. He has appeared on over 50 television shows, solidifying his expertise in media dynamics and public communication. Currently, he focuses on enhancing professionals' visibility through strategic media placements, combining practical knowledge and innovative techniques to help clients maintain a strong media presence. His insights continue to provide valuable transformations for global audiences. You can learn effective strategies for securing podcast guest spots, leveraging media placements, and amplifying their influence across social media platforms from Josef. So, Josef, welcome to the show.
Hello, Candy. It's such a privilege to be on your world-class podcast.
Oh, thank you. I would love for you to start with your story of how did you begin working in media in the first place?
Well, that's a long story, actually, and I might make it very short now. I studied actually in New York, upstate New York. I studied I'm from Austria, so then I went to India and for a long time, many years. And then I was very interested in world religions. So I studied for a master's degree in divinity in upstate New York, 5 years. A master's degree takes quite a while. And but then, all spiritual people, they get kind of broke sometimes. So I got broke. I was young, and I got a job, and I took it. And it was a job in a hemisphere newspaper, and I got a job in the 5th most dangerous country in the world, which is Honduras. It was Honduras at the time, 1995. So I started a local chapter of a newspaper which was connected by satellite in 16 countries. And I got into Honduras. I basically started from scratch there, 16 employees, office, everything from scratch. And I became the most successful of the 16 countries. So I moved to Buenos Aires. In Buenos Aires, I was at the headquarters. I became the general manager of the whole newspaper for another 10 years. And there I also was invited to television and to universities. So I don't teach in universities anymore. I'm actually having just my business. And I live now in Costa Rica, just since a week again. I was there before. I come from Mallorca now, but just kind of international person, right? And so that's how it started with the media, because when you are on television, and when you see that how effective your interviews are and how much fun it is after you overcome your public speaking, of course. And you work also with a newspaper. I wasn't a journalist, I was a channel manager, but daily was with the editors and all the things about news. And so, what I liked with the podcasting when I started with the podcast guesting agency was that there was a huge democracy in media, because you always had these media moguls, particularly in Germany also, there is this one very important person. He has so many publications, he owns the radio, he owns the television, and then you might not ever be interviewed, or you might not ever be published with the articles. And here now we can, everybody can have a podcast and everybody can be on a podcast, but you have to be good to rise up, like your podcast. You have to be consistent, and you have to continuously have new episodes and good ones. So the listeners, the subscribers increase. And as a guest as well, you can't go there and just speak, I mean, you have to learn what is fascinating. I always have I like to talk about curiosity hooks. Like when you ask me later on, you will see I use it actually a little bit to keep the audience kind of curious about the next few minutes or the next 5 minutes. What I'm going to say is can that be true? That promise, I say this promise, I have that credibility, but I also say, you can do this without an agency. Really, things like this.
Right.
So that is very important. When you are a host, you have your guidelines to be a real good host, but as a guest as well, there are things you have to learn.
Right. Well, and it's true. I mean, podcasting is easier now for people to get into and for the guests to be able to find shows, to be on, because, there's so many shows that are out there that do want to have interviews with experts in their arenas. But yes, there are some things, that the guest should know how to, interact with the host and what they should do beforehand, during, after, etc. So that's why I thought this would be a great topic to have a discussion, because I'm sure there's a lot who want to get into being guests if they haven't already. And I know what you're going to share today will be extremely helpful for them. So I would love for you first to maybe even talk about what are those key elements that guests should focus on to make sure that their appearances are successful and impactful?
Well, there are several key elements. Let's explain a few. And the first one would be probably to get on the right podcasts. The right podcast with good hosts. So you listen in a little bit. So because you might want to be right away on Joe Rogan's show, but you can be first networked, learn to network with the hosts. That's very important for all of your podcast tours when you do it often during the year, several years, from time to time, or every month, several times. So the host is very important because you want somebody who asks you poignant questions. You want somebody with whom you resonate and where your expertise resonates with the whole audience. And then you look at how much audience they have. I mean, it's nice to get a host which has 5,000 audience, which is a global rank number one. There are indicators for it. You get 5,000 listeners. You have a global rank of 5, which is pretty high. So there are hundreds, thousands possibly of audience, maybe more, because sometimes this is all estimations, that the numbers are not so exact. So then the next thing would be that you basically, there's not like this is the first step, and there's the next, and you have to take the first step first. It's like more like a circle. All these elements, right? These are the elements. So I don't know what is first and what is last, but these are the main things. And you have to have an expertise. So, if you have an expertise, everything gets easier. It takes a while to really focus on your value proposition, on what makes you unique, what is your premium service. You don't want to be everything to everybody, but you want to definitely have something where the people want more after they listen to this interview, and they come to the landing page or to the ecosystem of profitability, and then they become part of your Facebook group or of your newsletter, or they have a discovery call. Mostly they don't buy right away. Audiences on podcasts, they are usually high net worth individuals. They buy high ticket items, but on podcasts you don't sell. But you always think about what you sell. That's like a paradox. But if you don't think about your business and what you sell, you will space out. At the same time, what I just said, that element, the second element, is basically to have a deep expertise, a framework. People who've written a book, they have that usually already. If you didn't, then you have to really think about it, what I'm going to talk about. So an example, my expertise is quickly to say, it's like, it has changed over the years. I had other expertises when I was in Buenos Aires, that's like 20 years ago. But now I'm really good at booking people on high-end podcasts. So the whole booking thing, the research, and then get them on high-end podcasts and get them accepted, and then coach them so they have a good interview. That's my expertise. That's what I teach. That's what I do. I do what I preach. And then when you ask me questions about all kinds of things, marketing, bookkeeping, public relations, leadership, I can always bring it back. I'm not worried about what you ask me because I have that expertise. I know my
Right.
value in this discussion, and I just bring it back. So you don't have to prepare. Some people, they're very like anxious, and then they say, I want to know exactly all of the questions, but that's a very boring interview.
Mhm.
You know all the questions. I mean, you should be able to learn with practice, with practicing your public speaking, and you go to many podcasts. You start with you don't have to be average. I mean, on average podcasts, but go on podcasts where the host is good. That was the first point. Second point is now the expertise. The third point, I don't want to make it too long here. The third point would be that you are organized with the social media also, because nowadays with AI, you have this interview. It's going to not just like before COVID,
Mhm.
it was only 10% were were video. Only 10% were video, YouTube. Now after COVID, it's 70% is video.
Mhm.
Imagine. So then you have this video, this interview like on YouTube. So now you can grab that link and put it in a software, like online software, like Opus.pro or .clip, something which works with AI, artificial intelligence. There are several companies out there. Just Google it. You just grab that link on YouTube. It puts your video, your interview as a guest, and you can, if it's on YouTube, it's free. You don't have to ask anymore. It's like everybody can embed it. It's all there, right? And you can ask if you want, but usually podcasters love it when you promote the interview.
Mhm.
But you don't have to ask for the video because you get it right there from YouTube, and with the link, and it cuts up your interview into 20 clips, and it organizes it automatically all in a few minutes. So there are the highlights. It's a text also, and then a little description. And each time you talk about something, like when we talk today, we talk about different subjects, and then suddenly it takes one of those subjects, highlights it, and you can post it for 30 seconds on all these different platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and whatever you use.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
that is something which you also should be aware of. A podcast tour, like being on a podcast, it does its marketing automatically. It goes to all these platforms. There are 15 just for podcasts. But you can add it immensely, creating that status that you are the go-to expert and that you are the authority of the subject you're talking about. Because why would you be always invited? That's the myth.
Mhm.
People believe that you're always invited when they see you in interviews. The reality is that you have been pitching yourself or you work through an agency, because that's the reality. Sometimes you get invited.
Mhm.
Most of the time, even very famous people, they want to go on a tour. They want to have every month 3 interviews, and they have an agency. But the myth with the people in social media and everywhere is that this person talks, first of all, about that subject, that framework all the time, and so must be an expert, the go-to
Right.
expert, the authority on the subject. And then with those social media, with those clips, then they don't even listen to these 30 seconds of you. They
Mhm.
just see all the time, and they know that you're the expert. And if
Right.
they are subscribers to podcasts, then you're lucky, but very few are on social
Mhm.
media. On social media, you put that big link out there for you. I've had an interview, but nobody will listen to it because they are for different purposes, but they see that clip. So that's
Mhm.
new, very important. Content marketing strategy, basically, where you can use this. You don't have to think much anymore. What I'm going to post on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and Instagram. No, you have now these 20 clips, and from time to time, and you have that 20 clips from maybe 10 or 20 interviews. So for
Mhm.
3-5 years, you have always something to do, and you will love this actually. Everybody loves to see themselves. That's not narcissistic. That's not narcissistic. I mean, look at it. I
Mhm.
mean, you have a big picture of 30 people in there, right? And
Mhm.
there's you. Where do you look? You look first, bye.
Mhm.
And
It's
yeah,
true.
everybody does it. So we have that also. We have fun doing it. It's fun. First of all, you're afraid. My God, what I was afraid when I was on television the first time. But then then you overcome it. It becomes a lot of fun. So
Right.
then we have 3 points. Should I mention another one? Do we have time?
Sure.
2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So host. Then we had the deep framework expertise, and then we had the marketing, right? The social media marketing, additionally to the marketing which the podcast itself does, because
Mhm.
it's going to be posted not just on Apple Podcasts, but also on the other platforms, even Amazon. They have all podcast platforms. Google has a podcast. That's all there automatically. You don't have to do anything about it. So
Mhm.
when I think about a last one, that's the most important one actually. People oversee it all the time, but there could be 10 more, right? We know that. I'm not just simplifying it. But one thing is very important also, the networking. When you are on podcasts and you are talking with all these intelligent people, those hosts, you will be networking. Suddenly you have 20, 30 incredible people at your fingertips, so to speak, right? And let's say, even if you launch a new book, you can write them again. By the way, Candy, I've launched a new book. Is it a possibility to be again on your podcast? But you have a network for so many different things. Let's say you launch your own book and you want maybe make a collaboration of 20 experts. Well, where are you going, right? Again, you have a huge connection now with all these podcast hosts. You can send them an email and ask them. You have the email. And you have a network. And they know you because we know each other after this conversation.
Right.
You see? That's the fourth element, often overseen. Very important.
Perfect. Well, I had a couple of thoughts too on some of the things that you said. And one of them, I know you were talking about, the audience and how many people are listening to the show. And obviously, when you're first starting out, you're not reaching as many people, but it still could be your target audience too. So I don't know if, just trying to go for the big shows is always the best, because it may not actually have the type of listener that you're listening, that you're looking for too. So I would just say to the person who's thinking about being a guest too, don't skip the newer shows or the little ones either, because they can be great for, you to have reach, if your point is to get out there, right, and have reach. Some of those ones that are just starting out too can be helpful for you as well. And then the other comment, when you were talking about, putting your information out there on social media and you can, turn it into a bunch of clips and everything too, I would just say, just remember to link back or promote the person who actually interviewed you as well. Cause this happens a lot of times where people want to be on our show. They want to get exposure. And then we're asking them to at least, tag us so people find out about our show, and they don't do that. Right. And then that becomes frustrating for us because we've, put out for you to help promote you, and not to have anything in return is a little frustrating sometimes. So I would just say, help each other, right? That's ideally what we could do, is to help each other so that we can really find those people who need what we have to share. Because my passion is help entrepreneurs be successful. And I do that by interviewing people such as yourself, right, on the show, so that entrepreneurs can learn tips and tricks and, what they can implement in their business. So those are the thoughts I had while you were, talking about those different elements.
Yes. Yeah, I want to add something there, what you just said, which is fantastic and very valuable. I think that, just like with any other meeting, conversation, you always follow the human heartedness. I mean, I'm not going to a discussion, or I'm not going to get to know somebody in a coffee shop or in a restaurant and start only talking about myself. You ask questions, you have a conversation, you dig deeper, you are grateful for the time spent together. You want to follow up if it's mutually beneficial. And if you don't do that, if you just take that, let's say as a guest, and there are people like this, unfortunately, if you just go on podcast interviews and you just take that audience from that person, because you can leverage those audiences. In a year, you get 100,000 people to talk to. But you have to also be grateful that podcast host has worked hard with 200 episodes to build up this audience. Now you are allowed to talk in front of that audience. What can I give to that host? I can make an introduction afterwards. I can, first of all, give a real good interview. So it's value, it's content, because that's what the host needs. But I can also make introductions. I know a few people that would be interested to have the host on an interview afterwards, which is easy for nowadays to make an introduction via email. And then you have given something back. And then when you get that host to send you the material with nice artwork and all this, your picture again in there, which you love so much, and then all these other things of that interview where you're the great expert and you can use this and it's nicely done in Canva. Well, what can I do? You promote it, of course. You can do it yourself. Also do these kind of things a little bit. Let's say with the clips from the interview, but always make sure exactly that it's a mutually enriching experience, just basic human interaction.
Right.
And make sure if you appreciate the new contact, also the networking contact, because you never know why we are talking. We don't know exactly why we are talking right now. There's resonance. There's a meaning to this, and it could be very good in the future for you or for me to get in contact again. We have our emails now, that's for sure. And we have we have talked with each other,
Mm-hmm.
Very important.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I mean, it's a lot of work to actually put on a podcast. I mean, someone might think, oh, it's just simple. You just record, you put it out there. But there's editing, there's promotion, there's the time it takes, for all of us too. So it is nice to have when someone is grateful for the opportunity, so that's what I would just say is like, be grateful. Like if you're the guest on someone's show, just appreciate the time and effort that they put into helping you as well. So, but I would love for you to talk about too, like how can the entrepreneur prepare for a podcast appearance to ensure that they're actually delivering value to the audience while they are promoting their own brand, of course?
Yes, that's a very good question. So first of all, I invite everybody, if they're really serious about this, at no cost. At the end, there will be my website. You can always come. We can talk at no cost and no obligations. I'm happy to help you with a few more ideas. We can focus on your objectives with podcast guesting. And I can now say to you, answer to your question, what kind of value do you bring to the table of discussion? What kind of value without being salesy? Now, every podcast interview usually ends with a call to action. In other words, the best call to action is when the podcast host actually likes the interview with you so much, the host, that he will say, so how can people get a hold of you? Because she knows somehow intuitively that her audience is eager to know more. Some of them, 10%, 20%, 30%, who knows, 50, maybe all. So now there is this one call to action, which is, we want to know more, right? So how do you get more? Well, then at the end, there is your website. Make sure that you have a good URL, and that on that URL, when they go there, there is something which captures them. In other words, captures their email, gives them a free assessment. Is very important sometimes. Like you're talking about some very emotional intelligence and leadership. Well, let those leaders assess themselves. How good are they in emotional intelligence? Right? Make an assessment. Give a free chapter from your book on that page, which is the call to action, or give them a free discovery call, which is free. It's like at no cost. You give really value in the discovery. Right. They can really call it. They can talk with you. All right. That might be that they say afterwards, I'm an entrepreneur. You know what? I'm working with clients all the time. And for me, my time is more valuable than that money now. I paid that person actually money now, does it for me. I got to know him now, but I also could go to him and just ask the information. And sometimes it's like you start out and your time is not as important as the money. And you say, I can learn this. I have actually a bonus at the end, which is a free ebook. And that's really a good one, where you can learn in 30 pages how to get yourself booked on high-end podcasts. Now, high-end podcasts are important for later on. If you'll start out with the good hosts, that's the most important thing. And then you go up where you get high-level audiences. And that's a little bit what we talked before. Yes, it's true to go niche. A niche is always good, but the niche podcast, you will run out soon. You will have 10 niche podcasts and they are great. And suddenly you will have to go higher. You will have to go out. And like me, I'm doing podcast guesting. That's my expertise. So I can go into marketing, right? There are other places where I can go. I mean, you look at where can I go and offer my expertise so it's interesting even to, let's say, dentists. Maybe not, but I just say, right? But ultimately, when you go to the high-end podcasts, there are, and you have that already, prepared that kind of talk, that expertise, and you can talk even me about leadership. I could, and then bring in what you're actually doing and why it's good for leaders and all this. Then you can reach, or spirituality. I mean, it's not the real perfect fit now, but I'm just saying. For me, it's usually marketing. If I stay into the podcast niche, that's huge also. But there are so many talking about the same thing like me. So if I go to the marketing niche, I'm not afraid because I was teaching several universities and I know about marketing. I know about business also, business leadership. So I can go in there and talk about all kinds of things. And still then, after all, think about what I'm selling. And for everybody for whom it is valuable to be on a podcast tour, know more about podcast guesting as a marketing tool, as getting their brand more visibility and all this, then that's a great place also for me to be on that business podcast or on that marketing podcast. And so, the higher let's say you have a podcast with 1% global rank, it's 5,000 audience. Look, there is your niche is in there. If the podcast host accepts you because you made a real good pitch, you can go for hundreds of podcasts. I know people that have had hundreds of interviews. And you don't need to have hundreds. What you want is maybe 10 a year or 20 a year, and do this several years. But ultimately, when you have a real high-end podcast and they take you have your audience in there, and the other ones are also interested in what you're talking. If you have only a niche podcast and it's like 100 people or a few hundred people or maybe even 1,000 people, that's good. But you will run out of it. That's what I say.
Well, I think from my perspective as a host too, one of the things that, I'm looking for from the guest is that they are going to be sharing actual like tips and tricks and, information, and, having a story or something is good too. But sometimes they'll start talking and then they think of something else. And then, it's like 5 or 10 minutes later and they've just kind of gone down a rabbit hole, and it hasn't really imparted a lot of information to the listener. Right. So being able to know like the important parts of what you want to share, to really share details, because then again, if they're listening to you and they're like, oh, that's really helpful for me, they're going to want to reach out to you and connect and get more information. Right. And so, you don't have to give it all away, but share facts or tips or tricks or stories that really do engage the audience. And give them like a tidbit, that they can use to apply, into their business. So that's really helpful for like the purpose of my show, right? That's kind of what I do. So that's one of the mistakes I just mentioned, right? Like just kind of not having an idea of the concepts you want to share. But what are some other common mistakes maybe that people make when they're guesting on podcasts, and what can they do to avoid them?
Yes, I'll come back to that. I have to say something what you just said, Candy. Well, the thing is this, I go even further. Let's say, I come back to your question in a second. What I do, I give everything away. You can know everything, what I do, my blueprint, everything. Because my clients are only those who have more money than time. So they want me to do it for them. If somebody, as I said, is in a position, and we all have been there, and sometimes we are there again, whatever, that you say, I want to learn this, I want to do this myself, I give everything away. And I tell you something before, can I? It takes me, that's now a curiosity hook. That's a curiosity hook, which I explained before. You can do this several times during an interview. That one takes about 2 minutes, and I've explained it and said it. And I tell you the secret of doing this by yourself without an agency. Okay? All right. So that's what I learned doing it. And it's simple. You can learn it right now. And then if you want my ebook, it's in there also. And that's that's something I want to give during my interview. So I'm not selling anything. Don't buy from me. You can do this yourself. And I am giving it away. So when you research, the research is the most important thing. You go to, it's all in my book, in ebook afterwards. You go to listennotes.com, which is the most popular search engine for podcasts. You don't have to go to Google, nowhere. Listennotes.com. It's in the ebook. Because of my Austrian accent, I know there's sometimes a challenge here for you to understand. And there you have now a platform where you find all these podcasts. But before that, I think a lot of your audience is already aware of ChatGPT or perplexity.ai. But ChatGPT is great in that sense. That AI tool, ChatGPT, it's also in my ebook. So that's an AI tool, of course. And now you first work on your, about 2 minutes, right? You first work on your positioning, on your uniqueness. What is your expertise? Where I'm good, where I'm different. And then you give that positioning, which is the pitch of the email, where you say, these are the topics you can talk about. This is my biography, and this is me. That's my position. That's my strawberry in front of the host's mouth. That's why I think you will take me. But now you do something different, and that's the key now. That's the key. You are basically asking ChatGPT, you give that information. It's a chat, right? It's a chat. Like the AI is a chat. The chat. So, you know what? I give you information about me. What I really want is I want to identify, you can write that. I want to identify 30 experts like me. So I can check out on which podcast they've been on. You get it now. You see it already. And then pitch myself to those same podcasts. It's such a shortcut. It's such a shortcut. So ChatGPT gives you those 30. You can even ask, why do you think I'm, each time, please, next to the expert, tell me exactly why you think I'm an add-on or why I can add extra value to the table of discussion. It's very good for the pitch.
Right.
You can mention this. No, it goes into detail. All of this is in the ebook, and I wanted to make it sure you can do this without an agency. You have now avoided from 5 million podcasts. You have now avoided to come to podcasts which are not interviews based, but they're solo podcasts. You don't have them anymore. You've only reached those by doing this, right? Who have interviewed, because these were interviews. They were interviews. And you've only reached the best, because already you can see the global rank, which is in listen notes also, like 1% to 10%. Candy is 5%, very good. But that's also, you don't want to go below that, because then you really, it's a roll of dice. You don't know even if somebody listens to you. But you've already like hundreds and 1,000, and then 5,000 and 10,000. However, this is the key, and I don't want to say more. If you listen to this, that's my blueprint, and you can study it afterwards in the ebook. And now, quickly to ask the many questions, the many mistakes you can make. But first of all, in the mistakes, this is your question, my answer. First of all, you go on a podcast and you always ask yourself, why do I resonate with the audience? I'm imagining now an audience which is, they're entrepreneurs, there are people who are interested in these topics. I mean, they're interested in accounting, they're interested in the laws, because you have description already, right? And then they're also interested in learning about marketing, about business strategy. Everything business is a huge systemic field, and many different areas. One of them is marketing. So, well, I know what can I bring to the table in regard to marketing. And I'm talking only about a little aspect of marketing, which is podcast guesting. Basically get the word out about your business or your book or your product by going and talking 40 minutes on a podcast which has hundreds of audience or thousands of audience, and do this 10 times, 20 times a year. That's what I am bringing in, right? That's what I'm bringing in. And so what can you make a mistake? You can overly be salesy. That's the first thing. Sales. You can just talk too much. That's a problem with me sometimes, and I have to really be careful. And then you can just, in other words, you respect the silent note, which is, in the music, there is no music if there's no silent note. You know that? There are always notes, but there's a silent note also. So sometimes when you're finished, boom, stop talking. I'm not finished yet. So there's so many more mistakes. We can talk many hours more. But I just said it, basically being overly salesy, talking too much, not having a clear expertise, not being engaging, like other words, not having like a compelling story. You need a compelling story. What did I say when I came to the interview? I told you about what? I told you I was broke in New York. That's terrible to say that, right? But look, this guy is human. It's not natural. It happened to him when he was a student, right? After student. So you say things which makes it a little bit more compelling and interesting. But in other words, compelling, a deep expertise, making entertainment. More and more young people listen to podcasts. I know the statistics. And the podcasts are going up incredibly also in value. Like there will be $130 billion market in the year 2030. Now it's only $1 billion market. And the year 2030, it's a compound growth rate of 30% in the podcast industry. But more and more people are young, so they want entertainment. They want edutainment. They want to be educated and entertained at the same time. Think about all these things. Because if you're boring, then that's not helping nobody. Be happy, be funny, have a good conversation. I wouldn't know anything else. Just be, the last thing I want to say, just be human. In other words, think about the heart also. You are invited. Thank you very much. Give something. Don't expect anything. Be nice. Be generous. And that's how you do the podcast too. You will be loved. You will have a success. Think always about the last thing. I have to say it because otherwise it's not complete. You have to have an ecosystem of profitability on your website. If you don't sell anything, you can talk too much as you want. You can be on Joe Rogan show. You will not sell anything. You need to make money. It has to be a return on your investment because it usually costs something, right? It costs your time if you do it yourself, or it costs some money you pay to the agents. Ultimately, you want a return on investment. It's not bad to ask a 10x return, which is, if you pay, let's say, in my case, if you pay like $300 for a real top-level interview, like where you get 5,000, and you get 10 interviews. I have literally clients, they made a 6-figure revenue on an interview. But they were not salesy.
Right.
It's just that is the marketing funnel at the end, the ecosystem of profitability. So when the host is now eager to tell the call to action basically for you because you have been so good, and they say, I cannot forget it. Where can they get a hold of you? Where's this website? What is this bonus you talked about? So then you get that. That is very good. Trust is so important in business and in sales. Then you are getting people into your funnel, and that if you don't do that well, and you can repeat this with your social media campaign afterwards, always bring them into the funnel, always into the funnel. So that's
Right.
basically all.
Okay. Well, I know we're out of time, so I wanted to thank you, Josef, for being a guest on my show and, talking on this topic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Candy, for inviting me.
Do you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners? And if they want more information, how can they connect with you?
My offer is that ebook I wrote for those who want to go on high-end, like high impactful podcasts, want to be able to write an email with a positioning. It's called an email pitch to the host, and want to learn how to research and write that, and then do it themselves without an agency. And that book you can download for free, and it's only 30 pages, I believe. And it's my website, and then / and then that particular page. So my website, where you can also find other information and have a discovery call with me. You will find it there. It's called guestexpertsonair.com. And that page where you can get the free download of the book, because I also sell it, but there you get it for free. And don't forget, always you have also a discovery call at no extra cost if you want to. That is guestexpertsonair.com / podcast promo. Did you understand my English here? My
yes.
accent? Okay.
And we can have the link in the show notes too.
Excellent.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic, you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guests and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.